What up, y'all? Appreciate you showing up, hanging out, listening to my dumb ass. Like and subscribe. So, it seems that PlayStation, Sony, they just shut down another studio. So, what's worse? Getting a bad score in a game that the studio's not shutting down. People still got their jobs, right? Or shutting down a studio, never making another game. R.I.P. PixelOpus, that's the name of the studio. PixelOpus, they shutting them down because why? I don't know. I didn't even look into it, but I'm going to predict why. Without any information, they didn't make them enough money. That's what it is. That's what it is with Sony. It's like, yo, if you don't make us enough money, then you got to go. That's how it is. So I'm like, you hear about the bad news, right? You hear about the bad news from, Phil Spencer said this in the interview, and then all the ponies and the donkey unicorns, they jump on it. Xbox sucks. All this stuff, excuse me. And right? But nobody said nothing about PixelOpus. Nobody said nothing about them closing a studio. Now, I don't know how many people worked on Concrete Genie. I don't know how many people were actually in that studio. So, but that's bad because people are losing their jobs. That's more tragic. That's a more negative story than Phil Spencer saying some stuff on the interview and everybody overreacting, right? So this is an example, once again, of the biases or the bias, generally speaking, of the industry towards Microsoft, towards Xbox. I would say both. Microsoft is getting the extra because it's like everybody hates Microsoft because, oh my God, it's a giant corporation. And in the past, they were not the best. They were trying to do some stuff, whatever. But Xbox is not the same. Xbox is part of the greater company, but Xbox, for the most part, has not treated their consumers like hot trash. Although during the Don Matrick age, it was a little touch and go. But they kind of he righted the ship. He meaning Phil. But anyway, the point is, it is always worse to close a studio and to have people lose their jobs. Like if they would have said, okay, we're going to shut down PixelOpus, but we're not firing anyone. Or they could have just said we are absorbing PixelOpus into Gorilla or into whatever. And maybe that's the case, but you know what? That's not what all the headlines said. All the headlines said closing down the studio and disappointment. So, once again, this is part of business. So can you, is it a blame? Is it a blame of anyone? Is it poor management because their game didn't sell as much? Was it poor insight in saying a game like this isn't really going to do what we need it to do, what we want it to do as Sony as a corporation? On one point you can say, oh well, Sony was affording these studios to be creative and take a chance. But when you take a chance, then you have the chance of failure. And a lot of the times for Sony, these games are a failure because they don't meet certain expectations that Sony themselves expect. Words. And so if it isn't a Fortnite banger or one of these giant bangers and it barely makes any money, that's not good enough for Sony anymore because of how they make their games and how they're budgeting these giant AAA cinematic sad dad walking simulators. All these other games need to pick up the slack because the big games aren't. So none of the games are making money. And that's why it goes back to the Call of Duty deal. They're so scared to lose Call of Duty, that Call of Duty money, because their business model is failing. They literally admitted it in documentation. They said we're gonna not exist if they take Call of Duty away from us. Like, why is that? You guys make the best first party AAA bangers. What are you talking about? How is that even possible? And now we see why it's possible, how it's possible. Because none of their games that they make are making them enough money to sustain. And they can brag about, oh, we got all the console sales. We're number one. We're the market leader. You're the market leader, and you're on a thin line of extinction and existence because your business model sucks. And you can't make the money that you need to make to keep that facade up, to keep that reputation up of AAA bangers. They cost money. And guess what? They have to make money too. And why aren't they making the money that they need to make in order for you to sustain? These are the questions that need to be asked, that need to be answered in order for Sony to stay around. Now, Microsoft, they're smart, because here's why they're smart. And here's why Sony is not smart. Microsoft started in the 70s, right? Bill Gates, blah, blah, blah. They became more predominant in the 80s, 90s, such and such. They grew, right? And now they are a multi-trillion-dollar company. Sony started way before Microsoft. Why isn't Sony bigger than Microsoft? You know, I've been in the game so longer. And then this young kid comes around and just passes you by. Like you're not even walking. You're standing still. And they flew right by you like the Flash. And you're like, well, who's more successful? The young guy. They're doing stuff different. They're looking at different ways to do things. They're not stuck in their same old ways. And I think that's one of the problems with Sony is the traditional thinking of their businessmen, the uppers, the leadership. And they're, you know, it's traditional. They're old school. So in that thinking, in that way of thinking, they are hindering themselves for growth, for future growth. Now, they tried certain things, but the problem I think with Sony that I've seen over the years is that they try something new, it doesn't work right away or fast enough, and they abandon it. You know, like handhelds, right? So Nintendo was first to handhelds, right? For the most part, I would say Game Boy, right? I'm saying for real for a handhelds, not no Tiger Electronic stuff. Nintendo was first. Sega Game Gear, whatever, didn't work out. They even had the Nomad for the Genesis, not really, whatever. Even the TurboGrafx had a little, you know, portable, not really, you know what I'm saying? Sony was the only true competitor to Nintendo as far as handhelds go, right? They did the PSP, they did the PSP Go, they did the PSP Vita, and they gave up. Nintendo never gave up. They did the Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, DS, DSi, DS Lite, orders, 3DS, then they did the Wii, then they did the Wii U, and they were like, we got something here. Because when people got the Wii U, they thought the tablet was, you could take it with you. And that was it. That was the impetus. That was like, okay, that's the jump off right there. Made the switch, everything's history. Why couldn't Sony do that? Because they want to compete in the premier console gaming experience. You know what I'm saying? And so that was their problem. That was a problem, and they brought that into this litigation, and now it's their problem again. So, look, business is business. If you're not savvy or if you're not forward thinking enough to be able to adjust, adapt, and to change with the technology and what people want, then you're going to get left behind. And right now, it looks like Sony's going to get left behind. They're closing studios. That's the last thing they need. They should not be closing studios. They need games. They have one game coming out this year. And why are you closing a studio? They should, okay, Concrete Genie came out in 2019. What have they been doing since it's 22? It's 4 years later. They should have a game ready to go. Why are they closing them now? Did they make some VR games that nobody's gonna play? That's another reason why Sony's losing right now. I say losing in the sense that their grip is slipping. If you're paying attention and you see all the signs, it's like, oh yeah, Sony's selling this. And the thing is, it's like the messaging is, oh, Sony's number one, Sony's the market leader, and sure, by numbers, yes, they are. But look at VR. How many people they fail? They're closing studios. Fail. You know, they can barely stay alive. They can barely support their AAA games without third party, without Call of Duty specifically. Fail. There's many levels of failure within the Sony organization that is going to lead to their ultimate failure unless they change dramatically. And so, look, I'm looking at it in a way that Sony's on borrowed time right now. If they don't change their ways, then they're gonna be done, son. And they're definitely gonna be smaller. They're definitely gonna shrink. And this is the sign of shrinkage. It happened yesterday when they closed the studio. So shrinkage is happening. Yeah, I don't know what to tell y'all, but let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. But anyway, I appreciate y'all hanging out. Then my dumb ass. Go in the comments. Let me know Do you think Sony's strategy for, I don't know, success is actually gonna work long term? I know I asked this last video, and many of y'all said like 20 years later we don't think it is, and this is kind of an addendum to that. But at the same time, I did not know that they closed the studio. Yes, I didn't know the news yesterday, but now I do, and it's just kind of supports that thought and theory from the last video. But I appreciate y'all. Hit me up in the comments. Anything y'all want to talk about, it's all good. I read them all, remember. And I appreciate y'all. And I'll see y'all on the next one. To the wing.